I had a pretty interesting thought lately. Dick Grayson, otherwise known as Nightwing, is pretty spectacular. So much so that I should be really jealous of him. But for some reason, I'm not. He's incredibly athletic, he's very smart, he's amazing with the ladies, and he's gained much respect from the DC superheroes and villains alike. But for some reason, I'm not envious of this guy, which is odd because he's better than me in pretty much every single way. Is it because of the fact that he's a fictional character? Is it because he has a tragic backstory much like Bruce Wayne's? Well, maybe. Despite how he's much cooler than I am, I'm still a fan of Nightwing. In fact, many people are a fan of Nightwing. To me, this raises a really interesting question. What is it that makes Nightwing such a great character? In this video, I'm going to give you 5 reasons as to why Nightwing is such a lovable character and how he gained appeal from the masses. But before we move on, please be sure to like and subscribe to Reaver Comics if you don't want to miss out on our awesome content. Now, as we all know, Dick Grayson has a tragic backstory much like Bruce Wayne's. He witnessed his parents die at a very young age. He was born into an acrobatic family that performed in Haley's Circus. One day, a crime boss by the name of Zuko tragically murdered Dick Grayson's parents. Now, this prompted Bruce Wayne to take him in as his ward, seeing that he had a pretty similar life experience to Dick Grayson. Later on, he decided to train Dick Grayson in hand-to-hand combat and take him in as his sidekick, Robin. Then eventually, as he got tired of Bruce's attitude, he decided to ditch the Robin mantle and fly solo and come up with his own superhero mantle known as Nightwing. Now that we know who Dick Grayson is, I'm going to dive into why we love this character so much. First and foremost, he's not a derivative character. Have you ever wondered why there's barely any sidekick characters in the Marvel Universe as opposed to the DC Universe? Well, that's because Stan Lee absolutely hated the idea of sidekicks. He hated the idea of sidekicks because he didn't want to fall into the trap of making his sidekicks a derivative character of the hero. In other words, he didn't want to fall into the trap of making his sidekick characters a cut and paste version of our beloved heroes. Now, personally, I think that's a reasonable concern. Whether we'd like to admit it or not, sidekicks always get associated with their hero counterparts in some way, shape, or form. While all sidekick characters in the DC Universe get associated with their hero counterparts, not all of them are derivative characters. I'd argue that, aside from Nightwing's skill set and abilities, he's the polar opposite from Batman. While Batman is dark and brooding, Nightwing is very optimistic. While Batman keeps secrets from his comrades, Nightwing likes to build trust with his teammates. To put it simply, Batman finds comfort in the dark, whereas Dick Grayson finds comfort in the light. If you haven't watched Young Justice, I highly recommend that you check it out. It does an amazing job of showcasing why Dick Grayson ultimately decides on becoming Nightwing as opposed to Batman. While Batman sacrifices everything for the sake of the mission, Dick Grayson does not want to do that. He does not want to abandon his humanity. He wants to be a human being. He wants to have relationships with people. This is one of the many struggles that Dick Grayson has. Aside from this, he really struggles with getting outside of his mentor's shadow. Like I mentioned before, sidekick characters are always associated with their hero counterparts, and Dick Grayson is no exception. Whether Dick likes it or not, he'll always be associated with Batman. He'll always be associated with that force of nature that he doesn't necessarily agree with. Even when Bruce Wayne isn't around to be Batman, he still can't escape Batman. When Bruce Wayne got his back broken by Bane, Dick Grayson had to pick up the Batman mantle after Bruce's other successor, Azrael, went completely nuts. Then when Bruce Wayne recovered and became Batman again, he eventually died at the hands of Darkseid. Dick Grayson yet again had to pick up the Batman mantle, otherwise Gotham would have fallen apart. If you don't know what I mean, check out the Battle for the Cowboys storyline. That story does an amazing job of highlighting how nasty of a place Gotham can be without Batman there to protect it. Now, the point is, no matter how hard Dick Grayson tries, he'll always be associated with Batman. He'll always wrestle with the doubt of whether or not he can truly step out of Batman's shadow. By the way, his life is almost always objectively worse when he's closer to Batman. Despite his optimistic attitude, I'm sure it was extremely difficult putting up with Damian Wayne. For those of you who don't know, Damian Wayne is Bruce Wayne's son. He was raised by the League of Assassins, and he's much like his father in the sense that he has a very brooding and sociopathic personality. There's just way more of a freedom associated with being Nightwing as opposed to being Batman. When Dick is being Nightwing, he's being who he wants to be. When Dick is being Batman, he's being who he's supposed to be. Even when Bruce Wayne's alive and is miles and miles away from him, the world's greatest detective just can't seem to leave Dick Grayson alone. This can be really annoying, especially when you want to maintain some level of privacy. Anyways, the point is, Batman is the one thing that Dick Grayson can never truly walk away from. You can also make the argument that Dick Grayson's affiliation with Batman led to his character flaws. Now, on the surface, Dick Grayson doesn't really have any character flaws. He's a really chill guy, he lifts other people up, and he's all around a pretty decent person. The Teen Titans cartoon recharacterized him a bit in the sense that he had a super obsessive drive to take down Slade. Now, his obsession to take down Slade got the best of him. As we all know, he went solo and tried to take Slade down by himself. He pushed his friends away and he went as far as disguising himself as Red X, a wannabe supervillain, in order to gain the trust of Slade, all while doing this behind his friend's back. Kind of a dick move if you ask me. Now, in the main DC continuity, there were some instances where Dick Grayson had to keep secrets from his comrades, but he never went as far as Batman. Dick Grayson is much better at building trust with his teammates than Batman is. Dick Grayson is a much more authentic human being than Bruce will ever be. And this coincidentally is his biggest character flaw. I'd argue that Dick Grayson's character flaw is on the opposite side of the spectrum to Batman's. While Batman doesn't trust anyone, Dick Grayson is way too trusting of people. This oftentimes leaves him and his team open to betrayals. Probably one of the best examples of this comes from the Judas Contract storyline. In that storyline, Dick Grayson just chose to see the best in people. As opposed to using his detective skills to do background checks on his teammates, he just chose to believe in the best of people. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very nice sentiment. I definitely think that his heart's in the right place. The only problem is that not a lot of people are as pure-hearted as Dick Grayson. Much to the team's surprise, Tara ended up betraying them. She ended up siding with Deathstroke and Brother Blood so that they can form a plan to systematically take down each member of the Teen Titans. Now, the point is, instead of trusting people too much, Dick Grayson should operate in somewhat of a middle ground. Every once in a while, he should learn to take a step back and not leave himself and his loved ones open to being stabbed in the back. Now, ironically, this character flaw is what makes us love Dick Grayson so much. Instead of endlessly criticizing people, he chooses to look for the good in people. He chooses to lift himself and others up. This is probably why leadership roles comes naturally to Nightwing. In many versions of the Teen Titans, Dick Grayson is oftentimes the person who leads the team. Dick Grayson is amazing with people. It shouldn't come as a surprise that people naturally gravitate towards him. Even Superman went on the record of saying that Dick Grayson is a multiversal constant, meaning that in every single universe in the DC multiverse, there is no bad guy version of Dick Grayson. Across the entire multiverse, Dick Grayson is the light. I personally think it was an amazing move to have the Justice League disband in the comics and have the Titans, led by Nightwing, replace them. Nightwing is the perfect leader if you think about it. After training with Batman his whole life, he developed a strategic genius. And he has the people skills to build people up as opposed to constantly tearing them down, like his mentor would. Now, don't get me wrong, he probably does criticize people when the time calls for it, but you get the point. He's the perfect person in the DC universe to lead a team. Out of all the characters in the DC universe, he has one of the best attitudes, which leads me to my next point. Nightwing lets go of the past. In my opinion, Nightwing is pretty similar to Miles Morales. Now, spoilers for those who have not seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, and the rest of the Spider Society believe that being Spider-Man is a way to achieve some sort of moral atonement or a selfish mistake that they made in the past. Everyone needs to make a selfish mistake and have a loved one die as a consequence in order to be Spider-Man. The reason why Miles did not get invited to the Spider Society is because his canon event did not happen yet. Miguel O'Hara makes the assertion that Miles Morales' dad needs to die tragically in order for Miles Morales to become Spider-Man. Now, of course, Miles challenges that idea. Now, up to that point, Miles Morales' dad did not die, and he was still able to be a pretty great Spider-Man if you ask me. If you dig deeper into the themes of the movie, you'll realize that Miguel O'Hara uses justifications in order to do bad things, whereas Miles Morales does not. To Miguel, there's a justification to letting your loved ones die. However, to Miles, there is no justification to do bad things whatsoever. To Miguel, it's okay to destroy, but to Miles, it's not okay to destroy whatsoever. The way to go is to build. In Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Miles' uncle dies tragically at the hands of the Kingpin. Now, unlike Miguel, he does not use this tragedy as a justification to do bad things. To put it simply, Miles lets go of the past. This, coincidentally, is what Nightwing does as well. He lets go of his past traumas, unlike Bruce. As we all know, Batman went through a pretty terrible thing. When he was around 8 years old, he witnessed his parents tragically die at the hands of a low-life thug. When we see Bruce as an adult, it's clear that he has not moved past this trauma. Bruce Wayne is stuck in the past. In almost all iterations of Batman that I can think of, his parents get referenced a lot. Now, the funny thing about Dick Grayson is that his parents barely get referenced at all. I can't think of many Nightwing stories where his parents even get mentioned. Dick Grayson's parents were murdered at the hands of a crime boss named Zuko. Now, unlike Bruce, the person who committed that crime was brought to justice really quickly after that crime was committed. This might have played a role in him turning out differently than Batman. Now, regardless, Dick Grayson managed to move past his trauma, whereas Bruce just can't seem to escape it. There's something really appealing about characters like that. Instead of giving into hate and pessimism, Nightwing just chooses to move past things. He chooses to lift himself and others up. In a way, he's a lot like Ted Lasso. He's optimistic, he's got a great attitude, he's pretty forgiving, and he's all around a pretty chill dude. The people who let go of their trauma tend to do really great things. People who use their baggage as a justification to do bad things turn out to be not so great people. According to Batman, there's a justification to keeping secrets from your teammates and tearing people down. According to Nightwing, there's no justification whatsoever for doing bad things. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What do you think makes Nightwing such an amazing character? Be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. As always, please be sure to like and subscribe to this video. You don't want to miss out on our awesome content. Stay groovy.